Hi everyone, my name is Emily Green. I am a senior political science and Christian education double major, and I am excited to tell you guys about how I spent my past summer as a summer fellow at Presbyterian College. So, the title of my presentation is called Holy Inclusivity, an analysis on Judaized East Jerusalem and Presbyterian Church USA social witness policy. So, I wanted to start out by saying how I got interested in this topic in the first place because it's not really something that a lot of people are passionate about. And so in summer of 2018, I applied to be a summer fellow at the Presbyterian Church USA Office of Public Witness, and this is the building right here. It is in Washington, D.C., and if you're familiar with the area, on the right side of the street right here is the Supreme Court. So we are right in the heart of D.C. and all the political mayhem and excitement that there is. And so this office is responsible for taking whatever overtures are passed by the General Assembly, which is the main governing body of the Presbyterian Church USA, and taking any overtures with public policy implications back to DC and advocating one way or another on that. So my job in this role was under the international issues team. And while we worked on a lot of different issues, our main focus was on Israel-Palestine. And so this fostered my interest in this topic and kind of put the foundation in for my passion for Palestinian human rights. So after this, I knew I was going to do summer fellows. And so I actually got the opportunity to travel to the Holy Land for myself and see the situation on the ground. And I got a lot of content for this research. So the first image I want to point out is to right here, the bottom right. And this snaky structure right here, this is the iron wall that was constructed under Benjamin Netanyahu's leadership. And this is the wall that surrounds Jerusalem and kind of was meant to keep Palestinians out of the city. And so this is facing the Jerusalem side, and then on this image right here, this is on the Palestinian side of the wall. So you can see some Palestinians have created a lot of graffiti art on the wall showing images of what it would be like to kind of break through the wall, and it includes quotes. Notably, this one is from Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. About liberation and the human situation. And so that was really cool to see. And then one of my most formative experiences in Israel was when I got the opportunity to eat dinner with a Palestinian Christian family living in Bethlehem. And so that's this image right here. And this girl to my left in this photo, her name's Eliana, and she's around my age, and we still keep in contact a lot. It was really helpful during my research to ask her questions about what life was like under the occupation and how it is being a college student in this time and age, and she helped clarify a lot of the questions I had about the Palestinian experience. So this is what kind of prompted my research. Okay, so I want to start off by talking about the topics I covered this past summer. In my paper, I talked about the progression of Israeli settlements in East Jerusalem. I looked at United Nations resolutions and International Court of Justice rulings, and I also looked at Presbyterian Church USA official statements and overtures that pertain to Israel-Palestine. So I collected my data through academic journals, print books, organizational websites, and elite interviews. I'd say I spent about 30% of my summer going back through those elite interviews, which included my boss at the Office of Public Witness and with Eliana and her family, getting just information from people who are much more informed on this topic than I was. And then the other 70%, I spent looking at secondary sources from scholars. I'd also say that I spent a lot more time than I was expecting looking at the historical context and different agreements that allowed Israel to infiltrate the West Bank in the first place, and that's pretty much all I did for the first couple weeks. Okay, so I wanted to start off by showing this map. So in the green is Palestinian land, and in the white color is Israeli land. So at the time of 1946, this shows about the time when the British pulled out of Palestine as they colonized them originally. And this image shows the progression of the Aliyah, which is the Hebrew word for the immigration of Jews back to the homeland. So this first one right here is about the time after the Holocaust when the Jews started immigrating back into Israel. And then as it progressed, this one shows the UN Partition Plan of 1947, which established the separate territories for the separate governments, which established the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. But as you can see, after the 1960s, the Palestinian land started to dwindle away as Israel started coming in and making settlements in their land. So this is why I spent so much time on historical content and maps, because it can be really hard to comprehend. And so this image right here I got from B'Tselem, which is a Palestinian human rights organization, and they show the progression of Israeli settlements and what land is what. It really helps clarify some things up. So this green line right here was the armistice line that created the West Bank and Gaza. So this line is what is legal under international law, essentially. Everything to the left is supposed to be Israeli, and everything to the right is supposed to be Palestinian. And so I also want to point out this yellow line, which is the Jerusalem municipal boundary, and the red line over here is the iron wall that I showed a couple slides before under Netanyahu, a large wall that is essentially meant to keep Palestinians out of the city, who are not supposed to be there. And so I also want to point out on this map areas A, B, and C. So area A is exclusively administered by the Palestinian Authority. Area B over here is administered by both the Palestinian Authority and Israel, but it really just ends up being under Israel's authority. And then area C is area C, which is this light beigeish color, contains the Israeli settlements. So when they were created, areas A and B were chosen in a way to contain Palestinians, as they were drawn around major Palestinian population centers at the time. And then everything that was not area A and B was designated as area C. So you can even just see in this map before moving forward that Israel has found a way to control the Palestinian population by creating spatial discontinuities between those areas. And Palestinians are largely not allowed to cross anywhere that is not their territory, as designated by Israel, not by international law. Okay, so this is where we get to my research finally. So I looked at Judaization, which I defined as a secular process of imposing Israel's culture, values, and laws on Palestinians by creating discontinuity between Palestinian communities in order to stake a claim to the land. The goal of Judaization is to increase Palestinian dependency and adaptation to the Israeli order. So it's easy to see Judaization as a means of spreading Judaism as a religion to dominate wherever that process occurs. But when it first gained traction in the early 40s and late 50s with popular Zionist movements, including those in the United States, and the Jewish people had a valid biblical claim to the land, I have found that this process has a lot more secular motivations than religious, and that it now kind of revolves around creating financial profit for the Israeli government. So some examples of how Israel benefits from this system is that it's estimated by the Israeli Statistics Bureau that close to 80% of Palestinian families residing in East Jerusalem are below the poverty line. And additionally, because the Israeli military controls all the water, vulnerable Palestinian households can spend up to a fifth of their salary on water each year. So through these examples and many others, Israel has weaponized poverty in East Jerusalem by holding a monopoly on public infrastructure and services like electricity and water availability, so that Palestinians are completely dependent on the Israeli government. This is also true of the spatial discontinuities that I showed on the previous slide. So the second part of my research was suggesting a way that the Presbyterian Church USA can kind of fight back against this system. So the first one that I propose is support and engage in the BDS movement. This is a Palestinian-led campaign to boycott, divest, and sanction Israel until the occupation has ceased and the fundamental rights of Palestinians are recognized. So this movement recognizes that purchasing power is one of the main points of leverage that consumers and anyone, frankly, and interest groups have over the private sector. And so the Presbyterian excuse me, The Presbyterian Church has actually already addressed this issue. So in 2014, the church divested from Caterpillar Inc., Hewlett Packard, and Motorola Solutions, all of which the church designated as companies with non-peaceful pursuits in Israel. The problem that I see with the church's statement so far is that there was a quote in this overture. There was a quote in this overture that this action of divestment does not mean an alignment with the overall strategy of the global BDS movement. So I think moving forward that the church should align with the BDS movement more publicly and allow the Office of Public Witness to publish a list of all targeted boycotts, which is the 3 already in effect, and Sabra, Aheva, and SodaStream. So in this day and age, there are hundreds of companies that somehow connect to Israel and the Israeli occupation, but adding these 3 to the boycott list would make the PCUSA fully aligned with those boycotts targeted in the BDS movement, which strategically picks those companies to target the most pressing issues with the greatest potential for success. The second solution I propose is not one that the Presbyterian Church has explicitly addressed yet. So when I was researching, I didn't realize the magnitude of how much United States foreign policy was skewed towards Israel. So Israel has been a longstanding ally of the United States, and in return, we give Israel more than $3 billion in military aid per year. And to break that down even further, it's $8 million per day, roughly. And so this is a chart that I drew up to show how much money we give Israel. And simultaneously, we do not give any foreign aid to the Palestinian government, which would be the Palestinian Liberation Organization in the West Bank and Hamas in the Gaza Strip. And so some of the solutions I propose to kind of center U.S. foreign policy back towards at least an unbiased partner the first one is to call on the United States to refund the UN Relief and Works Agency for Palestinian refugees. So almost 2 years ago, the Trump administration completely pulled out of UNRWA, which again tends primarily to Palestinian refugees. And before this point, under the Obama administration, the United States was UNRWA's top donor, and our aid accounted for more than a third of UNRWA's budget. So by completely pulling out of UNRWA, that's definitely a huge hit to Palestinian refugees who are forced to flee their homes because of Israeli settlements and the occupation. And so the first solution is for the Presbyterian Church to call on the U.S. to refund UNRWA. The second one that I propose in this realm is to clearly specify what military aid is being used for. So you can see in this chart that the over $3 billion is just given to Israel for military aid. But if that military aid is being used for settlement building, which is illegal under international law, then that is a problem for the United States to have. And so if we are going to give money to Israel, then to clearly specify what that aid is for and that it's not to infringe upon Palestinian human rights. Okay, so now we reach my conclusion. I know this is a really depressing topic and it wasn't an easy subject to study all summer, but there is hope. So for areas for future research, I think that the Presbyterian Church USA should look at what other denominations are doing in the Middle East. The church as a whole has been in the forefront of the fight against the occupation and settlements, but it would also be beneficial to see what other churches are doing that might align with the church's interests as well and help the situation. And then for me personally, I think for future research, I would like to look at the attitudes of PCUSA members towards Israel because the church membership is not necessarily as forward-thinking as the church as a whole is, especially when it comes to Israel-Palestine, which people kind of turn their heads towards when those topics come up. And so I think the significance of my research this summer was to help create social witness policy in the future for the Presbyterian Church and help in future General Assemblies to address specific overtures in the Middle East Issues Committee. And I think the significance as well is to uphold the human rights for all of God's children This is a topic that not a lot of people know about, um, and it's often considered anti-Semitic by criticizing the Israeli government. But I made it very clear in my paper. I think that there's a difference between anti-Semitism and criticizing Israel for violating human rights and international law. And so I think this is beneficial for hopefully giving an understandable presentation about the problems that is occurring within the Israeli government and what we can do to fix it. Um, yeah, and so for my acknowledgments, I would like to thank the Summer Fellows Institute for helping fund my research this summer and allowing me to pursue a topic that I was really passionate about. I would also like to thank Dr. Nolan for overseeing my research this summer. He was really patient with me as I had a lot of questions and tried to navigate, especially the maps and the historical part of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And he really helped me a lot in my research. And then I would also like to thank my family and friends for supporting me along the way and being there for the hard days. And here are my references. So thank you for tuning in. I look forward to looking at your comments, and I will respond if you have any questions. Thanks.